In our next essential question, we're going to answer how do I divide with whole numbers, fractions, and mixed numbers. So this time we're going to talk division. So if you take a look at workbook page 117, you're going to see a series of different division problems that involve sandwiches. What if you have 3 friends and you're dividing 2 submarine sandwiches equally? What part of a sandwich does each friend receive? So if you look to the right, you can see we have our 2 sub sandwiches. And think about it, if you have one sub sandwich, like this one here, and you were to break it apart into thirds so that each of the 3 friends would get a piece, each friend would get 1/3. But we have 2 sandwiches, so that means each friend would actually get 2/3. 2/3 for friend 1, 2/3 for friend 2, 2/3 for friend 3. Take a look at the division problem over here. Here's our 2 sandwiches divided by the 3 friends. 2 divided by 3. Take a look at that second number, the 3. Look what happens over here. It's the same as saying 1/3. So here's our 1/3 here, times 2. Let me just erase this so you can see that again. Here's our 1/3, and we're going to times it by 2 because we end up having 2/3. So 1/3 plus 1/3 is the 2/3. So each friend is going to receive 2/3 of a sandwich. But I wanted you to take notice of the pattern here. 2 divided by 3 is the same as doing 2 times 1/3. Notice that that 3 now became 1/3. Number 2, if the 3 friends divide 5 sandwiches equally, what part of a sandwich will each friend receive? So this one's very similar to number 1, except now we have 5 sandwiches. You know if you only had 1 sandwich, each friend would receive 1/3. But if you have 5 sandwiches, it looks like friend 1 would actually get all of these pieces here. They would get, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 5. They would get 5/3 here. And another friend would get 5/3, and another friend would get 5/3. Take a look at the division problem. We have 5 sandwiches, and we're dividing it amongst 3 friends. 5 divided by 3. Look at that second number again. That second number, the number we're dividing by, the divisor, is now 3, but later on it becomes 5 times 1/3. That 3 became 1/3, and we ended up multiplying it. We have 1/3 of a sandwich here, but we times it by 5 because we've got all of these sub-sandwiches. So 5 times 1/3 gives you 5/3. Or basically each friend is going to receive 1 2/3 of a sandwich. Because 5 divided by 3, or the improper fraction 5/3, has to be turned into a mixed number. Let's keep going. What if Sasha has 1/3 of a sandwich? So you can see this is Sasha's area for his sandwich. He divides it into 2 equal parts. So here's the line that we use to split it right down the middle. He gives 1 part to his sister. What part of a sandwich does his sister receive? So maybe this is the section that he gives to his sister. How much is that? Well, what you would have to do is you'd have to divide the whole sandwich up just the way that Sasha would. Sasha divided his section up like that. Maybe this is friend 2 here, and friend 2 divides it up. And here's friend 3 here, and friend 3 divides it up. And of course this is Sasha over here, and he divides it up. You can see that it's actually been divided up into 6 sections. And Sasha gave his sister 1 of those 6 sections. So here's our division problem, 1/3, and we're dividing it by 2. So he has 1/3 of a sandwich, and he's cutting it in half. He's dividing it for himself and his sister. Look what happens at the second number here. The 1/3 stayed the same, but the second number, dividing by 2, well, that became 1/2. We turned the whole number 2 into a fraction. 1/3 times 1/2. And that's going to give us the 1/6 that you see over here. So his sister is going to receive 1/6 of a sandwich. Now what if Sasha divided the third of a sandwich into 5 equal parts. So he didn't just cut it in half, he divided it up into 5 sections. What part of a sandwich would each part represent? So here's Sasha's part, and you can see Sasha has it divided up into 5 sections, but all of the other thirds are broken up into 5 sections. So now we have a total of 15 different sections. And in this case, Sasha's 1/3 of a sandwich that's broken up into 5 sections, each part would represent 1 out of 15 different parts, 1/15. Again, take a look at the division problem that we have here. 1/3 is the section that Sasha has, and he's dividing it into 5 little sections, 5 equal parts, and that became 1/3 times 1/5. The 1/3 stayed the same here, but dividing by 5 was the same thing as multiplying it by 1/5. In this case, that's where we get our 1/15. So each part would represent 1/15 of a sandwich. Alright, moving on to workbook page 118. Almost there. How many 1/3 sandwiches are in 2 sandwiches? So here we're talking about 2 sandwiches again. And we want to know how many of those can be broken up into like third sections, little thirds. So we're basically doing 2 divided by 1/3. Here's our 2 sections. Here's a third, here's a third, here's a third. Here's another third, here's another third, here's another third. Did you notice that there's 3 thirds in each of the sandwiches? So since we have 2 sandwiches and there's 3 thirds in each, it basically becomes 2 times 3, which is 6. Again, notice the second number. The second number in our division problem was 1/3. But when we later on did some multiplication, we saw that that 1/3 became 3. 2 times 3, which is 6. So there are 6 1/3 sandwiches altogether. How many 1/3 sandwiches are in 5 sandwiches? Well, yet again, you know that there's 3 thirds in every sandwich, and there's 5 sandwiches, so you're basically doing 5 times 3. Here was the original division problem, 5 sandwiches, dividing it into thirds, and that became 5 times 3. The second number, 1/3, became 3. There are 15 1/3 sandwiches altogether. So we actually just explored a couple different cases of division. We saw case 1, we saw case 2, we saw case 3, but this is something I really want to point out to you. This is a brand new vocabulary word, and it's a very important one. It's called the reciprocal. The reciprocal of a fraction is a over b becomes b over a. It's basically when you flip a fraction over. Instead of the numerator being on top, you now flip it so the numerator that was on top is now on the bottom, and the same thing happens to the denominator. So the reciprocal of a whole number, like w, would become w over 1. So let me give you an example. If I gave you 3/4, the reciprocal of that would be 4/3. If I gave you 1/2, the reciprocal of that would be 2, or 2 over 1 if you want to put it over 1. The reciprocal of 1/5, well, that would be 5, or 5 over 1 if you want to put that in. What if you have a whole number? What if the whole number is, I don't know, 9? Well, if you were to flip it, it would become 1/9. That's because this 9, you know you can always put it over 1. It's a whole number. So think of it as 9 over 1. So when you flip it, there's your 1/9. How about the reciprocal of 100? The reciprocal of 100 would be 1/100th, because that 100 could be over 1, and you can flip it over so now the 1 is on top. 1/100th. That is called finding the reciprocal. Now, to divide a unit fraction by a whole number or a whole number by a unit fraction, here are the steps. You need to multiply by the reciprocal of the divisor. That's so important. The divisor, which was always the second number. That's why I always pointed that one out to you. The second number is your divisor. And we always turned our division problem into a multiplication problem, and we multiplied the reciprocal. So let's do some practice with this. Here, for number 7 and 10 on workbook page 119, all we're going to do is write the reciprocal of the divisor to make each statement true. We're not solving it, we're just rewriting it as a multiplication problem using the reciprocal of the divisor. So here is our division problem. We have 3 divided by 4. Our second number, our divisor, is 4. Let's flip it. Let's find the reciprocal of it. That's going to become 1/4. So we have 3 times 1/4. Over here we have 1/3 divided by 8. Well, our second number, our divisor, is 8. So I'm going to flip it, and it's now going to become 1/8. And notice we are now multiplying. We would just do 3 times 1/4 in number 7, or 1/3 times 1/8 in number 10. Okay, now it's time for 13 through 25. Well, we skipped it a little bit, but 13, 16, 19, 22, and 25 on workbook page 119. Our first problem is 5 divided by 7. Here we have 5 over 1 divided by 7 over 1. Remember, you can flip that second fraction. So now it's going to become 1/7. So now we have 5 over 1 times 1/7, which gives you, oops, that should be 5/7. Okay, the next one is 1/3 divided by 6. So here we have 1/3 divided by 6 over 1. I'm going to take my second fraction and I'm going to flip it. So now it's 1/3 times 1/6. And that will give me 1/18. And I forgot I accidentally erased that. That was 5/7. Let's see. Next one. Let's do 12 divided by 1/4. So I have 12 over 1 divided by 1/4. I'm going to take the second fraction and flip it. So now it's 12 over 1 times 4 over 1, or basically 12 times 4, which gives me 48. 2 more to go. 1/8 divided by 12 over 1. I'm going to take that second fraction and flip it. So now it's 1/8 times 1/12. And let's see, that will be 1 over 96, 1/96. And the last one that we're going to do together is 7 divided by 3. So 7 over 1 divided by 3 over 1. I'm going to flip that second fraction, so now it's 7 over 1 times 1/3, which is basically going to become 7/3. Or if you turn that into your mixed number, 3 goes into 7 2 whole times with 1/3 left over, 2 and 1/3. Alright, so our takeaways for lesson 311A: when you're dividing with fractions and whole numbers, again, put any whole numbers over 1. You definitely have to do that. But before you do anything, you're going to flip the second fraction. And then you actually multiply. We're not actually doing any division. We're multiplying the reciprocal. So you multiply your numerators and you multiply your denominators after you flip the second fraction. And then, of course, make sure your answer is a mixed number or proper fraction and is in simplest form.